Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Brevard Sports Network one-on-one here. And I tell you what, each and every year when I get ready to talk college football, we've been previewing. We just did the SEC East and the SEC West on BSN Sports Talk. And, well, what do I know? Because I tell you, each year when I get ready to talk about the Florida Gators, this is the guy I want to have on. This is the guy I want to talk Florida Gators sports with. And not just football, but the majority of our conversation today will be football. Please help me welcome back to Brevard Sports Network. It's always a pleasure to have him on. Been talking to this guy for years. He's a senior writer, editor, great storyteller with FloridaGators.com. Please help me welcome in Scott Carter. Scott, how are you, my friend?
Hey, Alan. Thanks for having me back. And it's that time of year, man. It's getting rolling. They started up camp yesterday, and just being out there on the sideline again. It's like, man, this is the fun part of the job when this stuff starts rolling. So, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, this is the time of the year, my favorite time in sports, August, September, October, when football is rolling, other sports, baseball postseason. Scott, you've been at this a long time. How long you been with FloridaGators.com now?
I was having this conversation yesterday, man. It seems like I'm like one of the veterans now around here. There's so many new faces. This is going to be my 13th season doing this job, and I started out in the fall of 2010. Came in about the second game of the year. Urban Meyer's last year, and man, has a lot happened since then, Alan, or what?
Are you kidding me? Urban Meyer's, man, you have seen all the drama, as we used to say up north. Man, you have seen it all. Coaching changes. Goodness gracious! You didn't get the championship years there,
but you bad.
Right, but you certainly got all the great writing years, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, there's never been a shortage of anything to write about at Florida. You know that. The fans are very passionate. And I certainly didn't expect to be on, my fifth head coach since I walked in the door. But you know what? That's the nature of the beast. And if you're not going to win big at Florida and be in the national championship conversation every 2 or 3 years, you're probably not going to be around long. And unfortunately, that's what we've seen. But I really like where they are right now with Billy Napier. I've been very impressed with him. He's just a truly a genuine guy, and what you see up front is who he is. I mean, he's a very detail-oriented. He's got a huge plan, added a lot of people, and it's really, I tell everybody, Alan, it feels like the whole program's been rebooted. And some coaches come in, and it just kind of seems okay. Can they do it or not? But it feels like everything is kind of new right now. And I think that has a lot of fans excited, obviously.
I want to start with a piece that I read yesterday or this morning, on FloridaGators.com, because last year, Scott, there was a piece in The Athletic that appeared, and I do like The Athletic, and I do think that there is, I love their sourcing, I love the way they write their stories. And there was a piece in The Athletic last year, Scott, that really struck me and stung me, because obviously I've become a Gators fan as well, about discipline and and toughness. And I want to talk about the discipline part first, because that's what the article on FloridaGators.com addressed. Tell me what you've seen change, because this has been one of the most undisciplined teams in the SEC over the previous 4 coaching regimes.
Yeah, it's a program that has beat itself some in recent years, and I think it was magnified really. To me, it all came down to the end of the 2020 season, when you got to remember the Gators entered that LSU game. They were 8-1. They were still in the hunt for their first college football playoff berth. and they got LSU at home, and it's a game that they should have won. And we all remember the Marco Wilson shoe toss, and how maybe that wasn't handled internally, probably as some people thought it should have been. And it just seemed to grow from there, Alan. It spilled over into last season, and that loss to Kentucky, I think they had 15 penalties. I mean,
Yeah.
you just can't win games with 15 penalties, man. And it showed throughout the year. I think as the season went on, and when you're in the moment, you sometimes it's week to week, and you kind of lose touch with the big picture. But I think it's easy in retrospect to look back and see, yeah, it was an undisciplined team. They beat themselves. They lost some games they should have won. But it really started back at the end of the 2020 season, and I think that's what doomed Dan Mullen in the end. I mean, I'm a big believer. I think Dan Mullen's a heck of a football coach, but I just think he lost something there, that he lost his team somewhere along the way. And when you do that as a head coach, your days are numbered. And now it's Billy Napier, and this guy is all about discipline. This guy's all about the details. The first day of his first press conference the other day, a big storyline was how all these guys are, something small. They're all wearing white socks, and if they're not, they're out of step, and they get word from their teammates about it.
Right.
They're going to have a hard time. And it seems small maybe in the big picture, but I understand if you've been on a team of any kind, or you've been in the military, if you're all fighting for a common cause, if you're not all on the same page, your team's going to eventually break down. And Billy Napier's done a great job of, I think, establishing that tone in camp, or really the last 8 months since he's been on the job. And like I said earlier, it's really been a reboot of the program, not only from this discipline standpoint and how we'll see how that shapes up on the field, but also the organizational chart. A lot more people. They're getting ready to move into their new facility that we've heard about for several years. So there's just a recharge here that I think the Gators needed. And Billy Napier is kind of built for the modern era. He's big into the NIL and understands how a place like Florida can benefit from that. So I just think it's a new page being turned down. And, we'll all find out together, what that means in the win-loss column. But I like where they are to reestablish a disciplined identity.
I thought, just to wrap it up with the discipline, I thought Chris Harry really summed this up well yesterday. He said in Napier's 4 seasons, the average at Louisiana, the Cajuns averaged 6 penalties a game, 42nd in the country in penalty yards. And that probably still didn't sit well with Napier. But if the 2021 Florida Gators hadn't ranked 63rd rather than 56 spots worse at 119, they weren't 6 and 7 either, which I think is a great point.
Yeah, I mean, he hit it on the head. Chris did a good job with that. And he's a seasoned guy. He's covered the NFL and college football for a long time. And we all see it, man. I mean, you don't have to be a coach to see when a team is committing these costly penalties, whether they're mental errors, technical errors, turnovers, whatever. You're not going to win consistently. When you're in the SEC and you've got these other programs, Alabama and Georgia, rolling and doing those things right, your chances of finishing first is not there.
No.
So I think it's going to take time. I don't know if there's a magic turnaround this year. I think they have some pieces in their first teams to be a good team, but if they're playing discipline and they're in some of these close games that they've been losing in recent years, if they're not making those mistakes, then you kind of expect some of those losses to turn into wins, and that make a huge difference from an 8-4 team to an 11-1 team.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We're here with Scott Carter from FloridaGators.com, senior writer, editor. Scott, I want to real quick just jump to recruiting here real fast, because I am awfully impressed with Billy Napier. I've seen him in Brevard County half dozen times. I've seen pictures of him at 5, 6, 7 local schools, and it's paying off. Bryce Lovett out of Rockledge recently committed to Florida, and let me just tell Gator fans, as excited as you all seem to be when Bryce committed to Rockledge, You should be, because to me, 6'7", 300-plus pound senior offensive lineman for the Rockledge Raiders is going to be, in my opinion, one of the next great Florida offensive linemen, and even better than anything that we've ever sent up there, in likes of Jawan Taylor, and we've got Richie Leonard up there right now. And so just a great recruit. And, of course, Jamari Lyons. We recently had a walk-on in track, budding track star Zach Sedaros, the 4A state champ in the 200. I love the fact that Napier is really hitting the state of Florida hard. And as we were discussing before we went on, back in the 80s, the late 80s and the 90s, Miami, Florida, Florida State, they won national championships for the sole reason that they recruited this state.
Yeah, I mean, you see it a lot more than we used to, Alan. You know, guys like us, we remember when Florida State, and Miami, they were always in the top 10, and they were locking down the state in recruiting. And, you know, other schools got smart. They said, hey, we've got to come down to Florida and start trying to get as many players as we can from there. And a lot of them have had success, and it's cost the big three, so to speak. And I think Napier, certainly since day one, he's emphasized, hey, look, we know when we recruit, we need to get most of our players from the state of Florida to do what we want to do. And I think they've made a lot of progress there. I mean, they probably have more buzz in recruiting this offseason than really maybe since the Muschamp era. Muschamp had some really good recruiting classes. It didn't show up in the field, but I think they've kind of reconnected there. And, you know, to talk specifically about Brevard County, I mean, I'm old enough to know that when the Gators are really humming, they're always got some guys from Brevard. When you go all the way back to Chris Collinsworth and Wilbur Marshall, and I think Reggie Nelson was from down that way.
Absolutely, Palm Bay.
Yeah, so I mean, they've always recruited Brevard County. That's always been a hot spot for not only Florida, but, you know, all schools. There's a lot of good talent over there, and so to see them, you know, get some of those guys from that area, Hillsborough County over in Tampa. Jacksonville's hot for them right now, and of course, you always got to grab some guys from Miami, and they're doing that. Yep. So they're definitely trending in the right direction. There's no secret to any of this, is there, Alan?
No.
You get players, coaches become better coaches, and your team starts winning games. And I think that's what they have to do. There's no mystery to it.
And I better mention this guy, or he'll never talk to me again. Chauncey Gardner Johnson.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
He was one of my favorite guys in recent years. Heck of a player and kind of a true personality. And you know, I still follow him on Twitter with the Saints. He's never boring, Alan.
He's a lot of fun, isn't he?
He is a lot of fun. And, you know, he was a guy, man. You just love to see how he kind of developed at Florida, and he's been the last great player they've had at that kind of nickel or star position, and they're hoping that, you know, they'll find another Chauncey Gardner Johnson.
You know, he did. You're absolutely right. And his breakout game, of course, was the bowl game, in which he was the MVP in. Absolutely. Here was Scott Carter from FloridaGators.com. All right, let's jump to the Gators and take a look at them. And where else are you going to start? Look, the SEC this year is an arms race with quarterbacks. I think the conference this year, I think it's had a couple of down years. I know Bryce Young was the Heisman Trophy winner out of Alabama, but that's Alabama. But I think when you look at the SEC as a whole, we had Joe Burrow a couple of years ago. When you look at it as a whole, I don't know that the quarterback position has been great over the last couple of years, other than, you know, a couple of teams. But this year, I really like the quarterback position from top to bottom. What are your thoughts on Anthony Richardson? He looked great in spots last year. Is he ready for the full-time role? 6'4", 237, 240. He's got the size. Nearly 60% of his passes last year. What's the prognosis that you guys are seeing from Anthony Richardson?
You know, Anthony's one of those guys, Alan, that, you know, he's got everything that you want at that position to be a star. And he's like one of these 5-tool prospects in baseball that you hear about and you can't wait to get to the major leagues. And I think Anthony's finally getting his shot in the big time this year. I mean, we have seen glimpses of him obviously last year, but this guy's only got one career start. He's had some injury issues, but that LSU game last year, the Gators lost, but they made it close because Anthony was so good when he came into that game.
Yeah.
And I think if they get that Anthony Richardson consistently, this team, he's going to cover what some of the holes that it does have. And that can make all the difference. I mean, we've seen guys like you mentioned Joe Burrow, in 2019. I mean, Joe Burrow was just kind of an afterthought when that season started.
Yep.
And then he turned into a record setting quarterback and Heisman winner and number one pick. And I mean, they're already talking about Anthony Richardson being a potential number one pick next year. I don't get too caught up into that because that's still potential. And Billy Napier reminded us up at SEC Media Days that I think Anthony has 39 career completions. I think he's ran less than 200 plays as a quarterback in college football. So there's a lot of unknowns about him. But what we do know is he's got a big arm. He's unbelievably athletic. I think he's really maturing and understanding the role of quarterback at this level and what you have to do, not only to be a playmaker on the field, but to be a leader, in the locker room and off the field and to set the tone for your team. And I think that's been what Billy Napier and his staff have worked really mostly with Anthony this offseason. They see the talent like we all have last year. So I think the way the Gators are going to go in 2022 is going to be a lot of the way Anthony Richardson goes. I think if he stays healthy, he's going to have a big year, and I think he can surprise a lot of people. I just you just want to see him stay healthy and not take too much of a beating because he's going to be active not only in the passing game. He's a very dangerous runner. He's going to do a lot of things. But I wrote this in a little piece I did before camp. I mean, I think it's reasonable, to say the Gators have the most excitement and potential at that position since another guy who we remember wore number 15. And that's saying a lot. And I don't know if he
Yeah.
can do it like Tim Tebow, but I think he has potential to do some special things there.
Here with Scott Carter from FloridaGators.com. And Scott, returning players not named Anthony Richardson scored just 10 of the 53 touchdowns the Gators scored last year. It's a stat that's thrown around a lot in all of the magazines and online previews. Running back position, Naquan Wright hurt a lot of the spring. Billy Napier goes and gets a guy he's familiar with in Montrell Johnson out of Louisiana, a former Raging Cajun. If Anthony Richardson's going to succeed, the Florida Gators backfield does too, in my opinion. What are we looking at there?
No, you're right. He's going to need some help there because you don't want Anthony, taking 15 to 20 carries a game.
No.
You got to have. I think Naquan Wright, who hurt his knee in the Florida State game last year, missed the bowl game, missed spring. He's back. He's healthy. I kind of watched him a little bit yesterday to see how he was cutting and stuff, and he looked fine to me. But in Naquan, I mean, people really got a good idea of what he can do in that Alabama game last year. I mean, he dictated that one drive that they had late. I mean, he was the whole offense on that drive, and that was against a very good Alabama defense. And Naquan's not very big.
No.
Not what I would call a burner by any stretch, but he is a shifty, hard to tackle, low to the ground runner. And he's also a very good receiver. So you got to start with him back there and use him with all his skill set. Montrell Johnson from Louisiana, Billy Napier knows what this guy can do. He rushed for over 800 yards out there last year. He's a bigger sized runner in between the tackles. He also knows the offense already, so he it's a seamless transition there. And then after him, you've got Lorenzo Lingard, who it was between him and Bowman, 2 5-stars in high school. Neither guy really has done much up to this point, but Bowman decided to transfer to UCF. I think Lingard, was the better option all along. And I think he's going to get a chance. So they brought in Trevor Etienne, who's, everybody knows his brother Travis now with the Jags at LSU. He might get some touches back there. I'm sure they're looking at this as a development year for him. But if they can get Wright and Johnson kind of play off their skill sets a little bit, get some spot duty and up the reps for Lingard. I think it's a group it can do some things. I don't think it's as deep as some of the recent backfields the Gators have had, but I think they have talent there that they can get the job done. And the big reason I'm going to say that is because who they have blocking for them. I think this is their best offensive line, depth wise and talent wise. I think it's several seasons. I think the offensive line is going to be a strength of this team this year. As you know, that's always going to help the running game.
Yeah, no doubt. And I want to just touch on that offensive line because the biggest knock on it last year was its physicality. It wasn't that it wasn't talented. It was just getting pushed around a little bit in the trenches. I do like the fact that Napier's using 2 offensive line coaches. I think that's important.
Yep.
Talk about why you believe, why you made the statement you just did.
Well, I think first of all, let's start with the talent. I mean, you've got some guys who have a lot of reps under their belt now, and Richard Garage and Michael Tarquin at tackle. They brought in, I think, the best player on the offensive line is a guy they brought in from Louisiana,
Yep.
Osiris Torrance. Wrote about him this week. He's a guy who's 2-time All Sun Belt, uh, 4th-year junior. He's got 2 years left. A big physical guy, 6'5", 347, veteran guy. So you put him at guard in there. Kingsley Ekpon at center, and you got Richie Leonard and some of these other guys at guard. Ethan White, who's really transformed himself. So that's a good group right there. And I think the physicality. One thing about Mullen's offense, especially 2 years ago with Kyle Trask, they were such a pass-oriented program that they were very good at pass blocking. But you're right, they weren't great at run blocking when they really had to be sometimes. And I think they've emphasized that toughness since this offseason, since Napier got here. I think they know that they're going to have to be better run blocking. So if they can still carry over some of their pass blocking tendencies under the previous staff and toughen up in the run game, which Napier's offense is going to demand, that's why I think this group, has a chance to really be a force and be a strength to this team. I just like the talent there. I like the attitude, and I really like when you add a Osiris Torrance. You talked about the athletic earlier. I'm a big fan of what they do too, and they rated him one of the top 10 transfers in the SEC this year. That's a big pickup for the Gators.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Switching from offense to defense, Scott. We were talking about Chauncey Gardner and when he was on that defense last, and about how I felt like Chauncey was part of, and you said it perfectly. He was really part of one of those last physically just punch you in the mouth type of secondaries that the Florida Gators used to have. And for me this year, and believing what I believe about SEC quarterbacks, I know the Gators are going to have to get a pass rush this year. And look, last year they had a great pass defense last year in terms of holding. I think they held opponents to like a 35.2% success rate. It was a great efficiency. But when you look at that secondary, and you even look, there's only 2 seniors that show up on this defense, really. It's still young, and its development and progress is going to be critical this year, Scott. Let's start from the secondary and work our way forward here, because I think the secondary is the key to the unit this year.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. You start with the veteran back there, a guy who is back in Trey Dean at one of the safety spots. Trey, he's had his problems at Florida. He's also had trouble finding a position. He came in, they worked him at corner. That wasn't exactly his best fit. They worked him some of that star. He was a little bit better. Now they got him playing more of a traditional safety role. And I think with his athleticism, his experience, I think he could have he's just a steadying influence back there. He's not one of these guys I think that, is going to, put up opposing offensive coordinators, make them, unable to sleep at night. But I think you need a guy back there to lead and to direct, and where the younger guys can rely on for some advice, because he's seen it all pretty much in his career. The guy who I really like back there at cornerback is Jason Marshall Jr. We saw him a lot last year as a true freshman. I think he fits perfectly into the tradition of the great Florida cornerback as he develops here the next couple of seasons. Won't be surprised to me if he's the next great one back there. Trayvez Johnson, a guy who the previous staff really liked because of his playmaking ability. He's kind of working at that star. I think he's got the right skill set there. He had some injury problems last year, but he's a talent. Um, a young guy who's getting a lot of pub is a true freshman, Devin Moore. He seems to look like a player who may be able to contribute right away. Rashad Torrance, another safety, hard hitter back there. He's the kind of guy you need back there. I like what he brings. It won't surprise me if him and Marshall are kind of the big time guys back there. Who's another true freshman, Kamari Wilson. He was one of the big swinging guys they swung from Notre Dame when Napier got here. So, I mean, those are just some of the names off the top of my head bouncing around. I know I missed a.
No, you nailed it, and I really like. I'm a big. I saw Kamari Wilson play down in IMG. I love Kamari. I think he's got a really good opportunity to be one of those great Florida safeties. I really do. I'm excited to watch this kid play. I don't know how much time he'll get on the field this year, but I do know this. I do know that I do like his bravado. I like how he's taken charge of kind of the new arrivals, last year when they all got up there. So I really like Kamari Wilson. Any surprises on this defense? In other words, is there a player maybe you didn't mention that we could look to see have a breakout year?
Well, there's a guy who I kind of forgot, and it's easy to forget him because he missed last year. The other cornerback spot, Jaden Hill.
Yeah.
He was a guy that they really thought was going to contribute a lot last year, got hurt in camp, and now he's back. So if he's kind of a sleeper. I mean, when a guy misses a season because of injury, you just don't know how he's going to come back. These knee injuries certainly not what they used to be. Guys come back better than ever oftentimes after a torn ACL. So I'm curious to see if he's a starter from day one and how he contributes. He was, highly touted when he got here. And so you throw him back into the mix. That's an important player. But overall in the defense, the names that people are talking about up front, Jervon Dexter, Brenton Cox Jr., both veteran guys. I think both have to produce at a high level. But the one guy up front who I think – I look at the defensive line, and they got some pieces up there, but there are a lot of untested pieces. I really want to see what Tyreek Sapp can do. I'm hearing good things about him. And I think if he could be one of those players to jump out of nowhere and be a big-time contributor this year, that's only going to make Dexter and Cox and some of the other playmakers on that unit better, if offenses have to worry about Tyreek Sapp. So it's a big question mark right now, but he's a guy I got my eye on, Alan.
Yeah, look, Cox, to me, the Gators are going to get pressure from one side, and I always have a problem with this guy's last name. How do you say Princely's last name?
Oh, man, I just call him Princely. I think Umielon.
Yes, yeah, that's it. Umielon. He's got to step up this year because I think the Gators are going to need to apply pressure on both sides of that defense this year. That's just my opinion, but we'll see.
He's a guy that definitely, I should have mentioned, they really like Princely a lot, and he's a guy that if he has a breakout year, that changes
everything.
Yeah, it does. It really makes a huge difference.
All right, on that again, and keep in mind, folks, that is a young defense. Of course, Ventrell Miller, what's he, a fifth-year senior, I think?
6 years.
6 year.
Yeah. I joked with him the other day that he may own the school record now because if you count the two interim coaches, Randy Shannon and Greg Knox, Napier's his fifth head coach in his career at Florida. I think that's a new school record.
It's got to be a new school record. Wrapping up here with Scott Carter. And Scott, I tell you what, overall, when you look at this team, it is young. I mean, you got a new head coach. The one thing I'm not a fan of the two, defensive coordinators. I've seen it before. I don't know that I've ever seen it successfully work, but I guess, Patrick Toney and Sean Spencer, I'm just not a fan of dual defensive coordinators. But, look, Billy Napier's the head coach of the Florida Gators for a reason, so he knows best. But I think having those two offensive line coach, sounds like to me Billy Napier is really controlling this thing. He wants to immediately establish his footprint into this program, and he's going to have to do it because the schedule is a weird one, Scott, in that you look at this, it is like a lot of SEC schedules in that it's very, very home heavy to start. But the Gators better have it figured out by the time we get past Halloween, because if they don't, they're in a world of trouble.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. When you start the season against Utah, the defending Pac-12 champion, you're going to be tested right away. And I'm sure, Billy Napier probably would have liked a little softer landing spot on his Gators career, but that schedule's been in place long before he got here, and it's an interesting matchup between a couple of programs that haven't met but one time, I think, about 40 years ago. So it's a good matchup both for a season opener and one that we're going to find a little bit about the Gators right from the start. And they are at home early a lot, which should help, especially with the heat and just being at home. A lot of night games under the lights. We all know what the Swamp's like under the lights, but they're going to have to play well from the start. Alan. They're going to have to be a disciplined team, and that's what they're talking about in camp. That's what they've worked all off season to build. And again, I like the first 22 on both sides, the first starters on both sides of the ball. I think they've got to find some depth here in camp and go into those early run of teams that are going to visit the Swamp with some idea of who they can rely on behind the starters, because you're going to need those guys. And then as the season goes on, like you said, when it gets into the heart of the SEC schedule in November, late October, if you don't have some of those answers by then, there's going to be some bumps in the road. So we'll see how it goes, man. Like I talked earlier, Alan, I just really like the mindset there. There's always optimism when a new coach comes in. There's always excitement when the season approaches. But I think this is different than any other time in Gators history, just because of where college football is, where the program is, and Billy Napier's, I guess, embracing of the modern era and understanding that, hey, it's a different game than what I came up following. It's a different system. You have to do things differently. And I think he's operating in that mindset, and I think Florida's going to benefit from it down the road.
Scott, I picked them at 6-4. I wouldn't be disappointed with that. Should Gator fans be disappointed with 6-4 or 7-3?
Well, I think that's kind of my baseline too. I think they can jump up a couple from those. I think realistically, if they are 8-4 and better, Alan, I think.
I'm sorry. 8-4 is what I said. I'm sorry.
I think if they're 8-4 or better, I think that's a good season. They went 6-7 last year. You know how losing seasons sit at Florida; they don't sit very well. Yeah. So I like what they have there. To me, and I can't stress this enough, I think people who know this program know this. It's going to ride so much on Anthony Richardson. What can he do? Can he stay healthy, number one? Can he show off what we all know the gifts are that he has? If he does, and he has the kind of season that a lot of people project, I think this team could surprise some people. But on the flip side, if he gets hurt and things go wrong, well, it could be a tough year one for Napier. But I think regardless of what happens, if they surprise me or if they, end up disappointing, I think they'll be okay in the long run. You got to look at it with the long view with Napier. But it is an intriguing year one for him.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm so dialed in on those darn high school 10-game schedules. I always think 10. It's crazy. But yeah, 8-4 is where I picked them. And I said, at worst 7-5 if things go south. And I tell you what, and if things go south, I don't see them going south the way that things have gone south for this program in the past. It'd be a different kind of south in terms of it would be a learning experience south. Utah, Kentucky, USF to start the season before they hit the road at Tennessee, Eastern Michigan, Missouri, LSU. All but Tennessee is at home. Open date, then it's, I still call it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, Georgia, at Texas A&M, South Carolina at home, at Vanderbilt, at Florida State. The Gators are home just once after their bye week, and that is against South Carolina. So, Scott, last thing, nice job by Scott Strickland up there getting Mike Holloway re-signed again. Not that it's any surprise, but look, Holloway did something this past year that, quite honestly, we've only seen 2 other times in NCAA track history, and that's the men and women sweeping the outdoor NCAA championships.
Yeah, I mean, right when you think he's humming along and it's peaking, they put together an unbelievable season. They won like you said, swept the outdoor titles, men and women, won the women's indoor title, I think, for the first time, I want to say, since 1992 or something.
Yeah, that's right.
They won 3 of the 4 major titles this year in college track and field. They're producing Olympians consistently. I mean, some of these performers they've had, whether it's Christian Taylor in the jumps, Grant Holloway in the hurdles, sprinters. I mean, they've just put out an amazing group of athletes on both sides over the last decade. And, I'll be honest with you, Alan, when I came up to Florida for this job, I'm like most other people. I was into the football part of it most. And then you get up here and you start dealing with all these world-class athletes like Kayla Dressel coming over to your office to chat, or now Katie Ledecky is an assistant swim coach,
What?
So it's like it's our volunteer swim coach. She's training for the Olympics in Gainesville and working with these swimmers with the Gators. I mean, it's an amazing group of athletes, and Mike Holloway is right at the forefront of that. He's known as Mouse on campus. He's got a great story if you don't know it. I mean, he's been around Gainesville, worked his way up, and now he's, to me, the premier track and field coach in college athletics. He's coached the Olympic team, and he's got things rolling. So I was glad to see the Gators wrap him up for 3 more years. And I fully expect Mike Holloway to kind of retire as a Gator, and one day there'll be something named after him. I think he's probably earned that by now.
We got a Mike Holloway down here in Brevard County. We call him Doug Butler. Gators have won 10 national champ, 28 times in the top 5. He's coached men's and women's student athletes to 84 national championship event titles. Scott, it is always a pleasure to speak with you. Your knowledge of not just football, but everything on that Florida Gator campus is incredible. And you know what, buddy? You're right. Because as I began to cover high school sports, I began to fall in love with sports like softball and track and field and swimming. Sports that I never knew that I could sit there and watch for 2 hours, but I do. Florida got a bowling team?
They do not have a bowling
team. Okay, all right. I'm just checking.
Maybe they have an intramural bowling team.
Yeah, I'm just checking. That's one of our most watched sports, if you can believe it or not. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Scott, I always appreciate you. Listen, good luck this year, and I think I think you're right, Scott. This has a different feel with Billy Napier, and it isn't going to be more of the status quo. It may not be this year, Scott, but it's coming, right?
Yeah, I really do believe that, and I'm not saying that. Just to say it, I told people I like Napier as much as any coach I've been around, and I love his demeanor. I love the way he interacts with people. Just a genuine guy, and he's got a big job ahead of him. He's learning some things, I'm sure, that probably he had to add to that huge notebook he brought with him of things he had learned over his career. But there's definitely a plan in place, and I think we're already seeing some of it on the recruiting trail that we talked about earlier. When you start making waves and gaining some traction on the recruiting trail, guess what? It's eventually going to show up on the field.
No doubt about it. All right, Scott. Listen, man, have a great football season. We'll talk to you as we did last year, sometime between basketball and spring. Take a look back and take a look ahead. But I want to thank you for joining us here on the Brevard Sports Network. So, for Scott Carter of FloridaGators.com, I'm Alan Slaughterzinski. This has been BSN One-on-One. Have a great night, everybody. And you know the drill. If you're going to have a great night, you better make it a sports night. Scott, thanks, man.
Hey, Alan, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, no problem. And I'll be in touch with you. Actually, I'm coming up for 2 games this year. I made up my mind, so I'll look you up.